right, guys. Really excited about today's episode of the Results Loading podcast. We have one of the kindest, most down to earth, and talented people that I know, not to mention a great friend and ex roommate, Saunder Johnson, founder, owner of Sauna Designs. Saunder, thanks so much for being on today, man.
Thank you so much, Michael. Appreciate it. Happy to be
Yes,
here.
sir. Yes, sir. Certainly. Saunder, I want to dive right in here. Can you talk a little bit about what sparked the idea for Sauna and what followed to get things up and running? I mean, how did we get here?
Man, it's been a crazy journey. Thank you for the question. Honestly, so I've been a creator my entire life. I grew up as a skateboarder, as a snowboarder. My father taught me how to be a woodworker. So my entire life, I kind of have been in this creative realm, and my entire family's really been in the creative sphere. And through my process of creating, I always was just kind of interested in filling holes wherever I saw them. So when I was like a skateboarder, I grew up and, that became my whole world. Then it became, oh, I want to make my own skateboards. Oh, I'm going to go and instead of, having somebody else make it for me, I'm going to figure out how to make a screen printing machine. And then, my dad was a woodworker, taught me how to make a screen printing machine. And then we went and started making our own custom skateboards. Then from there, we started kind of plugging different holes and seeing different businesses throughout the world. So like one of the big ones that when I was younger, my dad always kind of plugged on me was we would go and my family was a big wine drinkers. So we would always have a bunch of wine bottles laying around. And it was funny because essentially through the process, we were like, let's start a company where we cut these wine bottles in half and we put images on it. And then through this process, it was, oh, how do we take the acid cream and start making cooler designs on the cups? How do we evolve this and keep it going? And essentially, it's just me learning how to take my kind of creative energy and wanting to put it into the physical form. And it was always about trying to not necessarily do it where it's just a painting or something, but of different products that were of utility. So whether that was me putting an artistic spin on a skateboard or me putting an artistic spin on a cup or something like that. Essentially, like it just started this process for me of like always trying to think that like my little special flair is needed out there. And it kind of evolved. And essentially through time, I started just going and opening different businesses. So I used to sell minerals with our old roommate, Mariano. We used to go and sell crystals, and that was an awesome experience of learning how to, that whole market. Then it was, after that, I started kind of really channeling my woodworking into, making Zen gardens. So then I started making elite Zen gardens. And then it was just this whole process of me just kind of making businesses, then they just going to the next one, making another one, going to the next one. And it was kind of this weird cycle of me like just starting it, but then just loving the process of starting it. And it was this amazing kind of process where, oh, can I make a website? Oh, yeah, I can make a website. Oh, can I do the branding? Oh, yeah, I can. Let's do that. Oh, are we going to do the photography? Let's do that. So and it just kind of turned into this thing of expressing my creativity through like a professional way. And it was just awesome because I felt so much more like utility in the sense of it's one thing to make a piece of art for myself, but it's another it's another whole realm when it's for other people. So essentially it just started growing this in my mind. And then the funniest story ended up happening because essentially my wife and I, Anna, got trapped in her home island during COVID in Gran Canaria, Spain. And we're in Spain during COVID. And prior to this, I was a English teacher. So I was teaching kids in China English. And then woke up the next day and we lost our jobs. And we were in the middle of COVID and I couldn't fly back home to America. And we were just on this tiny little island. And it started being this really, it was scary at first, but then it turned into this amazing blessing of like, wow, like I have all this time right now. I have all this focus and I can just kind of come up with anything I want. And when I first went and visited Gran Canaria, I didn't speak any Spanish. So I didn't learn it. I didn't know any Spanish. I'm just in with the ride with my wife. We're just going out there having fun. And essentially I was scared because I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Like, I lost my job online. I'm trying to figure out what to do. I'm trying to like, all right, I need to grow my portfolio. I need to just like do creative work. So it was this awesome thing where essentially I just started going around to all of the local businesses in Gran Canaria, and I would just like do their graphic design and I just give it to them for free. Or I'd do them a website and I just give it to them for free. And then it was just this process of me just like creating without anything in return. And it just started building my portfolio, and I started seeing like, wow, like these people are like actually growing and able to use something from my creative work into their life and actually make a living off of it. And it was just this amazing process, and it just sort of started spiraling from there, honestly.
Yeah, it's really a classic entrepreneurial story. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard similar stories, all of them being unique, of course, of having your back against the wall. COVID really triggers a lot of these kinds of stories, especially with the founders who are similar to us in age, who during COVID 3-4 years ago were really trying to make that entry into the market in the professional world. And I lost my job and my back's against the wall. I got to do something. I'm stuck on this island in the middle of Spain, and I've got all this talent and I've got all these ideas. It's like, you know what? I'm going to walk the neighborhood. I'm just going to give it to them for free, because at that point, it's like, at least we're getting the brand out there. We're getting some brand identity, and we got a reputation to uphold, especially when the work kicks ass and people really love the websites and the branding and the marketing that you're doing for them. Word starts to spread. That's just the organic unfolding of a good business. So really, really classic entrepreneurial story on your part there. Yeah.
It was an amazing feeling because for me, it was like it was so daunting because I'm sitting there like, I can't speak Spanish, but I just was like, I kept sitting in my mind. I'm like, what can they not refuse? Like, where is the not, like, they cannot refuse that. So it's just kind of this thing where I'm like, because it was interesting because I always talk about it on our island. Gran Canaria is very they're a little bit further back in technology. So a lot of the things that we sort of take for granted in terms of like the sophistication, at least from my experience, some people are their expectations are a lot different than what my expectations were. So it's really interesting for me to kind of be humbled by the process of like, wow, like what is the true minimum viable product here, right? Wow, like how do we turn this process into, okay, we want to have all these creativity into there, but how do we make it accessible? Because that was the hardest thing to understand the balance of this, because I really wanted to unload creativity, or in my creativity, just make something amazing. But a huge thing that we ran into was like, for instance, when we were making websites on our island, a lot of the like phones that people are accessing for these websites are actually so much older that we needed to actually downplay a lot of what we were doing and really reevaluate what is the MVP, minimum viable product here, right? And it's kind of just this interesting thing of like, well, what is actually of demand here, and what is sort of this superfluous thing that I think is important? And it was a really interesting differentiator.
Right. And so can you talk about that transition from just dabbling with getting your name out there, getting the content out there, into an actual business, right? Because you're literally going around knocking on doors. Like that's as entrepreneurial as it gets, especially in those Genesis, like original days, right?
Yeah.
When did we start transitioning into giving the content away for free to thinking to yourself, man, a lot of these projects are landing. The feedback is really positive. How are we going to monetize this? And what did that process look like?
It was it was an amazing transition for me because, like I said, we were trapped in COVID. So then it was kind of like this thing of like, well, we just only can give away projects. And then it was interesting because it was such a beautiful situation where I'm in the middle of trying to get my residency in Spain, and the consulate office for our Spanish situation just so happened to be in Houston, Texas. So then we flew on out to Texas. We're going out there, figuring out we're just getting immersed in everything, trying to understand what's going on. And it honestly just started with this same process where we have no established community. How do we take zero to something? And we just kept creating, kept filling in holes. We'd go to restaurants that were our favorite spots. We'd go to our favorite friends or whatever. And then we just offer different things. And it was interesting because as this process kept going, we just kept getting more people that wanted to stick with us from the beginning. So essentially, my wife and I, we travel a lot. We were in Texas for a little bit, and then currently our base is in Las Vegas right now. And just going through these big communities and just meeting different entrepreneurs and having the work stand for itself in terms of like, we have this product that is hitting all of the different bases and just really honing in on how do we make this as great as we possibly can to really like satisfy all of their needs. And it was really like this thing of just plugging each little hole that we could, just slowly learning all the skills that we could, whether it was for web design where it was learning different platforms, or it was, you know, graphic design where we're learning just different skills. It was really about fine tuning our skill set for like the first year to 2 years to really understand like what is like the most important thing within the marketplace, and then also how do we efficiently bring it to people in a way where it's cost effective as well as like time effective. Because that was like the most difficult challenge for me transitioning from being an artist into more of the entrepreneur realm, is how do you quantify creativity in a way where you can replicate it for scale, right? How do you create a system in which you can give somebody a unique and creative project, but you can also have a scalable business model where you're not going to only dump energy into certain projects because of creativity? You know what I mean? That was kind of the threshold for us in terms of like taking our business from just ground level into, all right, how do we figure out these systems to be able to essentially understand what is the necessary requirement for the stage of this project in this point? What is this point? What is this point? And that was a really difficult thing, especially when creativity is like so abstract, especially, you know, whether it's making a website or getting somebody's idea down for their brand identity. It's very difficult to understand what is the chronological order. And for me, it was really about figuring out how to understand the most that I possibly can to get that expertise, and then essentially figure out what systems I find to be the most efficient. It was a long time though, I'll be honest. And it took a lot of like us using task management softwares and different things to just kind of understand how to get our head into where is the priority at this specific moment, and then how do we get to the next thing.
Yeah, and I think that that's very common, especially among like young companies, up and coming companies. Like, where is our product market fit going to be most impactful? Where are the pain points that we can come in and bring value and that we can make it sticky? We don't want to be like a car salesman where once they drive off the lot, we never see them again, right? We want them to come back for more. Like, okay, we did a little marketing for you. Now they come back for branding. Okay, they like that. Now they want the website. So you're juggling all of these elements on the creative side, but also need to maintain that entrepreneurial business side as well, because at this point now you're actually running a business and you have a lot more on your plate than, you know, going and being creative. And it's kind of an interesting mixture, art and business, especially when the passion is really on the artistic side and the creative side. You know, that's where your talents really come into play. But now all of a sudden you're managing, like taking on these new skills and understanding how to like actually run the business efficiently and dealing with all that. So it's really a great come up story in terms of having to dip your toes into both pools, if you will, and letting that creativity and business mix so that you can have a prosperous outcome.
I appreciate that. Yeah, you know, it was interesting because for me, I always kind of took it from a maximalist point of view where, you know, a lot of people, for instance, like in woodworking, it was an additive process, you know, add. But I always really liked the reductive process where it's, you have a block, right? Whatever it is, and you can kind of carve out from there. And for me, I always looked at like our business as sort of helping people chart a journey through carving what that is and having insight with a person like me that can say, oh, this direction may not be what you're thinking, right? And then understanding how to carve that into essentially the only things that are left are just the things that you value the most. And that's been an interesting thing for us because, you know, especially in the creative field, a lot of people can be biased and it can be very subjective in the sense of like, oh, I think this looks good. Oh, I think like this is, you know, it can be biased. So for me, like a huge transition for this was trying to take our process to being more objective. All right, how do we get the most amount of examples of this typography so that we can, you know, understand that, for instance, do you want a more professional look where you're going to have less stylized font marks? Are you going to have a more crisp logo where you have no stylization on your typography? Or are we going to go into color theory and understand how certain colors make you feel certain ways? Or, you know, just really taking more of a scientific approach to how we get to your ideal brand strategy, your ideal, you know, website, whether it's understanding people's UX or user experience patterns of how they intuitively will look for certain things. Just sort of trying to find that perfect balance between intuitive as well as creative and logistical. That's been this very interesting thing for us.
Totally. And I want to kind of get back to your unique design and feel and your process, because as an artist, I want to have a better understanding about your unique feel and design. Can you talk a little bit more about the Sauna signature look, if you will, your target audience and how you kind of got to that point?
Yeah. So
or would you say, or to elaborate further on that question, is there a unique sauna feel, or is it more personalized based on what the customer needs? Because I think some artists, a lot of there's similar underlying themes visually and aesthetically that are noticeable. It's like, okay, like there's 3 paintings in front of you. These are all done by the same guy, of course. Is that kind of am I on track here in terms of the sauna design and the signature look that you guys are providing? Or is it more like let's analyze what you guys are doing. Let's really take a look at what you currently have, and then I can create options based on what the situation at hand really demands?
I appreciate that question. It is exactly the latter. And this is very contrary to a lot of people's opinions on it, because a lot of people will say, oh, it's, you know, their style, I will fit your style. And it's very niche oriented. And that's perfectly fine. For us, we really are trying to, like, I would say the signature style of Säana would be really trying to find that balance of like the mathematics. So for instance, with our banner right here, right, we always go through and try to sculpt the geometry so that it's as similar as we can to the Fibonacci ratio. So essentially we try to use different mathematical principles that, for instance, like the Greeks were inspired with all their different structures. Essentially, we try to go and find our definition, or I shouldn't say our definition, our closest interpretation of achieving it perfection with the math, that essentially that is what we try to allow to be our style. So essentially, we try to go and make sure all elements align with the Fibonacci ratio. If not, we try to make it so that circles align within this ratio. If not, we try to make sure all of our different lines are just cohesive with each other. And we really just focus on, yes, your logo is going to be here, but how do we adapt that to everywhere? And how do we adapt that to being the same feeling in every spot, whether it's a tiny logo, a big logo, a word mark, a combination mark, it's on a billboard, whatever it may be. How do we create that same feeling, regardless of my own bias, and to be as representative of your business as possible? So that's been the big thing, whether it's us understanding brand identity and making logos as responsive as possible so they represent you, or you know, going through and trying to figure out how to find every responsive point for your website so that we're able to make it so that every single phone that you're looking at it represents you the best way possible. It's just been this process of, at least for us, where we can't give you advice unless we've been there. So let our expertise kind of show you, okay, every single phone, we're going to make sure it's exactly crafted to what you think. Every piece where that logo is at, we're going to try to make it exactly your vision. So I guess if that answers, that's kind of our style that we try to go with.
No, that's fantastic. And personally, I'm a huge fan of the golden ratio. You've done a lot of great work for us as well, and I've seen the process. It makes a lot of sense, and man, I can say it's clean. So regardless, I think that your process and approach to each specific project makes a lot of sense, especially given the industry that you're playing in. So yeah, definitely thank you for sharing that. And with that being said, what about the more tumultuous times? I mean, this developed organically in a way. You kind of fell into it. Obviously, the talent was there, but the genesis of Sauna doesn't really sound like it was planned per se.
No.
Which are some of the best entrepreneurial stories, in my opinion. What about some of the mistakes or adversity you dealt with maybe early on? I know that when starting a business, it's not all, unicorns and rainbows, as we know. What was some of the adversity you dealt with early on, and how did you overcome some of those challenges to ensure that you're still sitting here talking to me today?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's been a lot. I think the biggest thing as I go through my journey was understanding communication. And I think it was really understanding communication in all senses, whether it's the client is understanding what I'm saying and not assuming anything, whether I'm understanding what they're saying and not assuming on their part, going through and having a contracts that make us have, both have liability as well as responsibility within the dynamic. And what does that look like? How do you present these different things? And as I think about my journey through entrepreneurship, it really comes back to that it really is about the communication, in my opinion, and making sure that all sides are in tune with what each other is saying to the most that you can. And the reason why I bring this up is because it's very difficult, especially working in tech or in branding. Some people assume certain things are this way, and they could be very subjective. We may think a lot of these things are objective. Oh, I really like, light blue. What is light blue to you? There is so many different examples of, oh, I want a little flare on this. Ooh, I want a swoosh on this. All these different concepts that we may think everybody can relate to, oftentimes we need clarification. And at least for me, as I think about like my biggest mistakes through doing this journey, whether it's messing up on a contract because we didn't talk about it correctly, and be able to groom out the details into having a understanding where it isn't a learning after it's already done situation, or figuring out how can we do this process and communicate effectively with each other's given pass so that we can get to your desired project quicker. That has been a huge thing. And it's been a process, I would say, for me in a lot of ways, because whenever I'm going through this, I always try to not think to answer, but truly allow whatever the client, whether the other business owner is saying, and just really try to sit and understand and like try to come to an understanding of, do I know what they're saying, and do I have a good idea of where they're trying to go? And if I don't, I need to have the courage to be able to ask them, and to really clarify those things. And I think that is the hardest part of the beginning of it, was having the courage to really make those hard decisions of like, no, we didn't manicure this contract right, and we need to talk about this because I'm unsure, or I know you're unsure, or understanding, making sure we have the same ideas and definitions of what is expected. And I think if I would have done that more from my beginning, I would have solved a lot of heartbreak.
Yeah, no, it's such a good point. I see and hear a lot of stories and from founders who will design a product and just throw it at the market and hope something sticks. It's like throwing spaghetti at the wall. And so often you hear about those startups who end up failing because they weren't able to identify who their ICP is. They couldn't find that product market fit, and they weren't getting positive feedback or listening to what the customer's having to say. One of my favorite quotes is, build something that people want. Don't build something for the market and expect it to work. Because I think that happens a lot, and people aren't willing to have those initial conversations with customers in volume and find out, like, what do you guys need? What is the pain point here? How can I help you sleep better at night? Like, what are some of the things keeping you up at night, and how can I help? And I think what Sauna works on plays a big part in helping some businesses kind of get it to that next level, whether it be a great website or SEO or marketing or branding or anything in between. It can make a big difference. And I hear too often those conversations not being had because they're not willing to communicate, and they're just, everyone thinks that they have a great idea, and a lot of ideas are great, but you really, really, in those fine-tuning stages, need to ensure that the feedback is going to be positive and that it's going to be sticky. Otherwise, you just get cannibalized, and that's kind of ends up being it for you,
Totally.
because those conversations aren't had.
Well, and for me, it's like, you have to round out your product through the marketplace, and that's only through opinions, and that's only through different experiences with it. And I can say, I lean more into my artistic background than I would say my entrepreneurial background. And that is one of the most difficult parts for me, especially in the beginning, was not identifying with that work. Like, it is just a beautiful diary entry into the day, and then it's not representative of me for the rest of my life. It's you have to create and let it be. And if you don't, and you're identifying with it, you're not going to have the momentum to keep going. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And with that being said, I want to make sure we take a moment to give a nice shout out to your wonderful business partner and wife. Can you talk a little bit about the impact that she's had on your business and how your guys' dynamic has led to such success for you guys in Gran Canaria and on nation worldwide, actually, as well?
Yeah. So my wife and I, so I'm technically the UX designer. So essentially I like to come at it from the point of view of, I'm the big picture. So essentially I get the big ideas in there, and then essentially she's the one that helps me refine all these different elements. So she's an amazing communicator. She's trilingual. So she knows Spanish, Italian, and English. And she's always been this amazing person to help me always understand that it's coming from everybody's perspectives, or at least a broader perspective than my own. So it's always been interesting to kind of have different, I always love to have different perspectives into my work, but Anna has been one of the most pivotal pieces in it for me, because just her background is so diverse, from the 3 languages she speaks, whether or not and all the traveling that she's done, just all these different experiences have kind of compiled her brain to be very visually oriented, as well as like understanding words and understanding how to articulate words in these offers into really captivating ways. And it's been amazing because essentially I'm able to focus on the bigger picture in terms of getting it out there. And then she really helps me refine these images and make sure that it remains still cohesive with what the desired outcome is. Right. So that's been an amazing thing. I guess you would say advantage for both of us in figuring it out was, because at least for me, I always had trouble taking the big perspective and then dialing in the little things. And essentially she always had trouble getting the big idea there, and then she would be great at dialing it in. So essentially we took the best of both worlds and used her communicative brain and kind of used all of our advantages into forming one awesome unit. So I know it sounds
yin and
crazy,
yang, man. It sounds perfect. I mean, it sounds like obviously, as we know, match made in heaven, but definitely offset each other perfectly. It creates like the dream team over there.
Yeah, you know, and it's just about understanding each other's weaknesses and helping each other with those weaknesses so that even on our off days, we're able to go and know that person and their context and be able to help them out through those different things. And that's been an amazing advantage, at least for me, with opening a business with my wife, is it's been this amazing journey. Like I said, Sauna, it's about us taking our clients through an adventure of their brand identity or their website design. For us, Sauna has been a work of art for both me and Anna. And, you know, our names together, Sauna, translates to a bunch of different things. But for us, the main translation was it basically represents, it's a gift of art. And it's been an amazing thing for us because it really has been representative of us trying to just give art to the world in a way where people really value it. And for us, we found that to be in business.
I love that. It's really beautiful too. I mean, to be in business with her and you guys really have the fantastic dynamic, not just in your terms of your relationship, but in terms of your strengths and weaknesses. And you found that sweet spot to have a prosperous business is just fantastic. So I'm thrilled to hear that, man. To wrap up here, switching gears a little bit on the more positive side of building startups. I know we kind of touched on the challenges initially, but for you, and I really love asking founders this question, what does success mean to you beyond the metrics, the milestones, beyond the clients, beyond the revenue? What does success mean for you, specifically pertaining to Sauna Designs?
So like, when will I consider Sauna successful, or like, what is my
No. So obviously you look at the numbers, you look at you got a clientele, you got revenue, you're still kicking. Away from those metrics, away from those milestones, what does success mean for you on a deeper level, away from like the business side, if you will? Like what allows you about what you're doing with Sauna to go to bed with a smile on your face?
You know, I think the definition of that would be, for me, is it always comes down to self-respect. And I'll explain this. I think my definition of that success is when I will respect myself enough to be able to charge the price in which I deserve through my experience, as well as the self-respect for the client to desire what they actually deserve, right? So a client is going to, you know, somebody that is successful in the successful energy, they're going to desire products or things that help them achieve that self-respect. They respect themselves enough to be able to get what they want. To be able to, you know, whether it's a good brand identity, they respect themselves enough to say, you know what, my business deserves the best. I'm gonna respect myself and my business and give it to them. As well as same with the owner, to say, hey, I respect myself enough to charge based off of my experience and based off of what value I'm bringing to the market. So for me, I think it always goes back to this healthy balance of what is self-respect for the client, where you're charging a price where you're not disrespecting them with the value you're producing, right? If there's more value and you're charging a self-respecting price, hey, everybody's happy, right? It's about finding that balance of self-respect with the client's vision as well as my vision. And I think that that's ultimately the beautiful balance that I'm trying to find.
That's fantastic. Yeah, no, it's like when you're able to accomplish a win-win. And I think that's what a lot of founders strive for and crave, is if they can monetize an idea, but at the same time, that idea is actually bringing value to someone else and makes someone's life easier. It's like when you're able to accomplish that win-win scenario, that's it, right? I mean, for entrepreneurs and founders, that's it. What more do you want, right? And you know what that means is like you're establishing positive reputation, positive brand identity. People want that. Customers want that. They don't want to do business with some asshole. You know, they want to have the relationship that you're a perfect example of. Like you genuinely want your customers to be happy. And I think that makes a big difference long term.
Well, and ultimately that we respect them to the most possible, that we're willing to do what we can. And that's why we charge the price we do. Right. And I think that that's the things where it's all about that dynamic of like, you know, sometimes cheap things end up becoming expensive. Right. And I think it's all about, hey, we're here to try to understand the journey, not necessarily make money. And I think that that journey begins by understanding the respect boundaries on, you know, when is this giving too much of my time? When is this, you know, when am I not giving enough for the price that I'm charging? Right. And how do you find that balance between the two? Because ultimately for me being successful in this is me going to bed knowing that I gave an amazing value to the people that trusted me with their businesses and essentially their babies. Right. And then how do I also go and respect myself enough to be able to make enough money so that I can keep doing this for another person in the future? Right. And that is this amazing balance that, you know, I guess you would say that would be where my version of success would be.
That's just great, man. Well, look, I think what you guys are doing is fantastic. Our company's obviously benefited greatly from our partnership with Sauna, and really big fan of what you guys are doing and what you stand for as business owners. So thank you again for everything, and thanks so much for joining us here on the Results Loading podcast.
I really appreciate you taking the time, Michael. You guys are the best. I'm really happy to be out here.
Cheers, brother. Well, good luck, and obviously we'll be in touch, and I'll keep an eye on your progress and success as we move forward together. So thanks again, man, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. Have a great one. See you soon.